Hello, hello, and welcome to our show. Today's show is very special because we have my amazing friend Andrea Brock here visiting. Hey, well, thank you all very much. Sounds like we have Sylvester Stallone visiting with us too. Well, maybe we could interview him too.
Yes, good idea.
Andrea is visiting me from the United States, and we wanted to get together to make this video to help Jehovah's Witnesses. You see, there seems to be this impression that there's harps and rainbows.
No unicorns, but maybe doves.
No
Probably
unicorns.
some doves.
They're far too magical.
Mm-hmm.
But that there's some kind of divine direction that is leading the organization and directing them from the Bethel headquarters.
Yes.
And, you know, millions of people base their life decisions based on the policies and the different things that come out of what this organization says, how to live your life. And it's so important for people to really understand what really goes on at Bethel. Well, the wonderful thing is that Andrea here had served at the Brooklyn Bethel for actually a few years. And that's why we wanted to talk to her, because we wanted to see what really goes on behind the scenes.
Yes.
Okay, so hello, Andrea, again,
Hello.
and welcome. We're very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So first of all, I want to know, how did you end up at Bethel? I mean, there's, single women cannot just find their way and, apply to Bethel and find their way into Bethel. So there's really two ways, as far as I understand. You either marry your way in, or you have some special skill that they're looking for, which, like, you're a doctor or a lawyer, which, funny enough.
Ironically, yes.
Yes.
And higher education is entirely discouraged. They don't want you to do that. But sometimes you are invaluable if you have that.
Exactly. So how did you find your way in?
Well, I was raised and born into the religion, third generation. I was always very zealous, even as a child. My mother got a phone call from the neighbors that I was out with the magazines when I was like about 4 or 5 years old, knocking on all my neighbors' doors. I always very, very much believed it was the truth. So therefore, all my goals throughout life were always that I was going to do as much for Jehovah and for the ministry as possible. So I absolutely refused to pursue any higher education. In fact, I very adamantly told other people not to either, which I feel very bad about now. So my apologies if any of you are watching, were the recipient of my zealousness, or more like fanaticism at one point. So I took part-time work. I started pioneering. I had gone off the list for a while. I then moved to Toronto, where the need was greater, and pioneered in a congregation there. Went on a Bethel tour, as everybody kind of does, and ended up, I had relatives there at the time, and they, unbeknownst to me, were trying to set me up with someone. I had a selection of brothers that I met one night. It was actually very embarrassing, but also kind of funny at the same time. And everyone knew it was my uncle doing it, not me. So it worked out okay. But anyway, I met somebody that night, and we really hit it off and got to know each other, got engaged, had a conversation. Should we apply for Bethel? Should we not? Should we go pioneer somewhere? We decided that it would be a good opportunity, because I would never have that opportunity for any other reason. So that it was considered an honor and a privilege. So we thought, hey, let's give it at least 2 years. We kind of set that goal, but to revisit it at any needed point in time. So that is how I ended up there.
So basically, the Reader's Digest condensed version of this is that you slept your way into Bethel. Works for me.
That's not so bad.
But I do want to add that, Andrea and I are both from Victoria, and everybody was so proud of her when she found her way into Bethel. They'd always talk about Andrea's at Brooklyn Bethel now. I mean, because she's a Canadian girl, and she's not just in the Canadian headquarters, the branch office. She's in the big place, right?
Yes.
So we were also very proud of her.
Yes.
So what was your first impression when you were at Bethel?
Well, even first, before I even got there, even the application process was interesting, because we were given like little different tips and hints on things. I think actually this even came up in Pioneer School. But even that, I had to write a letter to go accompany all the other supporting documentation, like letters of reference from the Canadian branch too. They gave those to me. I had been a day worker there. But even the letter that I wrote had to be taken notice of in the style that Bethel liked. So a certain font to be used, a certain letter writing style, which ironically, in school I had taken a lot of office classes, and it was very outdated and old. So it was actually hard for me to put it in that format because it just looks so archaic. But even that was to show your submission and how you followed things and how you wanted to do everything exactly perfectly the way they liked. And I remember kind of thinking, this is a little weird.
Yeah, it must have been like a red flag to, you know, everything. So, I mean, you're not even in Bethel yet. And you're just applying for it. I mean, I understand a lot of companies, they have a set way of doing things. I get that. But that's on their, you know, when they're putting out their letters to everybody.
Yes.
But you're just applying. So
yes.
That's really.
Yes, just applying.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
My first impression there, Gaskin, I'm sorry.
Your first impression was it was a little. Rigid, I guess, right?
Yes. My first impressions that. First of all, I did not go there with rose-colored glasses that unfortunately many people do. Our family had gone through a number of things when I was younger. So from the point of being a small child, a young girl, I saw a lot of things that most people don't see.
Yeah, born into.
Yeah, and also personally experienced seeing what some bad things that happened with my family. So I already went in with actually a very low expectation, and I was hoping so much I was wrong, and that I would see something different when I got there. But you had basically, it's a corporation, it's a business. They're running it as such. They have their rules, their regulations. You absolutely have to fall into line, or you're out. It's pretty simple, pretty cut and dry.
So, what was your first assignment then?
My first assignment was housekeeping, which is very typical. You know, you're usually in a cleaning or housekeeping department, something like that. That's usually where you go.
But you had other skills that could have been better utilized elsewhere, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Are you able to say, hey, yes, I'll be happy to do housekeeping? No.
I put those things into my resume when I sent that in. So anything that I was good at, they would already kind of known, but you would never go, again, unless you're a lawyer, a doctor, there's some special skill you've got through higher education. It's not. You're just, everybody starts doing that. But I didn't care. I mean, I still, to this day, it's not like it's lowly. I never viewed things like that.
We love cleaning toilets.
I do. No, it was no big deal.
So you never felt that they were trying to keep you humble. It was just, or did you feel that
way?
Well,
they say, oh, everything's equal and whatever, but yet you start in cleaning. So obviously they don't think that's equal, or they wouldn't put you in cleaning. So it was a lot of little ironies of things like that.
But you did end up asking for something different at one point.
I did.
Why was that?
There was a few circumstances. First, I wanted to go into the laundry department. That was considered a lateral move, so that was okay to ask for that job change.
Or scrubbing people's underwear. It's about the same.
Yeah, about the same thing. Yeah. And there was different reasons for that. Also, I had developed a carpal tunnel problem, which, by the way, is long gone. Never had a problem again. That is very common with housekeepers. In fact, interesting little story on that. One of my overseers was known to be very chauvinistic. And I was telling him this problem I was having, and that I was going to go to the infirmary, but I wanted a particular doctor to go to. There was one I did not want to go to. There was one I knew that would really actually help me and I could talk to. And he said, well, what does your husband think about this? And I looked at him, because here I'd been on my own since I was 19 years old, moved across the country, very independent, can take care of myself. And he's asking me what my husband thinks, like, hello, it's my risk, not yours, not his. Yeah. So I basically just said to him, well, my husband knows that I know my body, very aware of what would be good for it, what wouldn't be good for it. So he's supportive of whatever I decide is the best thing to do. So
good answer.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's like, okay. And actually, ironically, being as chauvinistic as he was, that's too long a story to get into, but he was not that way with me. I got respect out of him, which was kind of interesting too. Yeah, I always do.
Good. So I should just back up a bit. You were talking about housekeeping. There was another thing that you would do with housekeeping is, as I seem to recall, you said you would knock on people's doors on a regular basis to check if
Yes, if someone's homesick, basically there's different issues involved. One day somebody died when they were in their room. The housekeeper didn't check on them. So that then implemented a procedure of, in the morning, you knock on the door when you come on. Then after lunch, you knock again to see if they need anything and make sure that they're there. Really, there's a couple of reasons for that. Yes, I mean, one person died over years of being Bethel, but really it's also because they want to check in to make sure you're actually sick and that you're not, and they don't want to you don't want to be too comfortable if you're sick. They don't want to have you to be too comfortable.
And you had an interesting story about was it your uncle that was also a Bethel?
Yes, yes, a relative there. He was homesick, he was older. He was homesick, and he had a speaking assignment out of town, so he needed his car for the weekend. It was a Friday. He got a call from the garage that they'd finished with it, but he had to go get it during work hours. He had to go pick it up to go get it, or be locked up. He couldn't get to it. So he left his room just to go get his car, move to the parking spot, and come back up. Well, the housekeeper knocked on the door, and he wasn't there, and then he came back. She determined he wasn't actually sick because he had done that. So she told on him and tried to get him in trouble because he left his room. She felt pretty stupid after, as she should have.
Not cool.
No. So you're constantly monitored when you're there, but you also, you know that going in. I mean, you're told that going in, but yeah, definitely everybody's watching you because it's a communal living. That's what you get, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever feel that, you know, as time is going on and you're living at Bethel, did you ever start to feel that even your own personality was being lost? I mean, that some people, yeah,
absolutely. Again, it's a corporation, it's a company, it's communal living. Everything is for the greater good. And so absolutely, they want you to fall into line. If you had better ways of doing things, if you came up with something, you would have to be careful who you said it to and the manner in which you said it. Just like any of you in congregations, if you have a question on a doctrine or something, you can't just ask a question. Depending what congregation you're in and what elder, you would know, which elder do I go to? How do I phrase it? You can't just be you. You can't just honestly, sincerely ask things. I'm happy for those of you that can, by the way, that's great, but that's not the everyday occurrence. I've had it happen a number of times. That's not a story.
Like,
yeah, there's lots of stories.
Okay, like what happened, for example, I remember you telling me you had a friend of yours that was actually disfellowshipped.
Well, yes. There was someone that everybody loved. He was awesome guy. He got disfellowshipped, so it's announced, because when someone in the Bethel family is disfellowshipped, there's an announcement made that morning worship that so everyone knows. And obviously he had left the building by that point, left the premises. They announced that he was disfellowshipped at morning worship. I was very, very upset. I got to my assignment in the morning, and there was someone covering on the floor. There was actually, we'd met in one area, there was 4 of us all together, and one of which was this one individual who you could classify as like a Stepford wife. She actually even looked plastic. Like, she actually didn't even look real. And that was really because of her whole personality. It wasn't, her actual physical look. Anyway, I was upset, and I said something, and I was talking to the other 2 sisters, and they had, they weren't as upset as I was, because my husband and I knew him better, but they were like, oh yeah, that's terrible. And then she comes along. Actually, she wasn't involved in the conversation. She walks by and she goes, remember, sisters, we are not to mourn those disciplined by Jehovah. I about blew a gasket. In fact, I don't know if any of you have ever seen that movie Office Space. For those of you who have worked in cubicles, it's like my personal cult classic. It's a comedy, but there's one scene with a fax machine where I was getting enraged by her. I looked at her and I said, he got disfellowship. What am I supposed to say? Yay, yippee skippy. I was thinking.
Did you actually say that?
I did say yippee skippy. I don't say that. I was thinking
of
something else, but
right?
No,
right?
I was thinking.
So yippee skippy works.
Yippee skippy was acceptable. So anyway.
And then her reaction was what?
Oh, she was like, just a prudish, whatever. But it was awful. She was so cold. I looked at her like, don't you have any feelings? Don't you have a heart? Don't you care about anybody? And so the other sisters, because I was getting so upset, they pulled me away and they took me into a room to calm me down. And I don't think I ever actually interacted with that person again. Yeah. And I never found her to be real. She was very fake all the time. So it wasn't someone I cared for, and I didn't care. Yeah. So, but it was sad.
But it just goes to,
it was just an attitude. But she wasn't the only one like that. It wasn't like that was an isolated incident.
There's
other
many.
people.
By the sounds of it.
Yeah, a lot of great people too.
So I think a lot of people may want to know, did you ever have dealings with any of the governing body when you were there?
Yes, I did, actually.
Okay.
At first, I was the housekeeper for Jack, John, and Mildred Barr.
Okay.
Mildred Barr.
I remember them. I met them too.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mildred Barr was one of the sweetest, kindest, most humble, loving people I have actually ever met in my life.
Other than me.
Other than you, of course.
Yeah.
It wasn't counting you in that. No. No, she was an absolute doll and such a pleasure to be around. Like such a hard worker and so very committed to everything that she did. And I remember she was older, was elderly then, and she was working every day, regular shifts, and then that had cut back a bit. And then the brothers, she had some health things happen, and she was old. And the brothers had her cut back her hours. They wanted her not to work as much. She would come home earlier. And I remember her coming to talk to me because she was her housekeeper. Plus, she liked me anyway. We loved chit-chatting, and she was English.
How could she not?
She was English. My father was English. I had fun with her. So I remember her telling me and just saying, well, I guess it's okay. And she was feeling guilty that she couldn't do as much. And one thing I want to address, because I see this a lot in the internet and I get kind of irritated, the governing body members that I personally knew and dealt with and cleaned their rooms or whatever, or saw their rooms anyway, even working assignments that would be around there, their rooms were not anything, like they weren't living in these glorious suites with gold bathtubs like people seem to indicate. The Barr's room was a regular room. I mean, yeah, sure, it was a nicer one. They had like a separate like little bedroom area. Actually, I don't think they really did those, but I'm trying to remember now. But it was just a normal room. Like it wasn't like their stuff. It was just normal, like anybody else. They weren't about money.
Did you
really
see
weren't.
any Rolexes or pinky rings?
No, I did not. No, I did not. Absolutely not. No.
Just wondering.
No. They were really sweet. And he was kind of shy. He was kind of quiet. He'd come home. He was very polite. I didn't really see him that much, but always very, very kind. And you said very quiet. He was quiet.
Brother Swingle, I think you said.
I love Brother Swingle. Brother Swingle was a doll.
He called her babe.
He did. Let me tell that funny story. It's actually hilarious. Okay. Anybody that knows me, not a morning person, never have been, never will be. Yeah, right? You know that. That's evidence point. Yeah. So he was living at that time was living in the same residence my husband and I were. Well, I was running late for morning worship, which would happen a few times because we had chosen to be in a different building for the breakfast because it was closer to where we were working. Because my husband and I both worked in the same building. So I had a distance to run. That reminds me of another funny story to the one after. It's hilarious. But anyway, so I'm running down the stairs in the morning because it's, I'm not going to take the elevator. The elevator was for the older ones. It wasn't that high up. So I'm running down the stairs and all of a sudden I'm like, there's Brother Swingle on the stairs. And he hears me pumping down the stairs. And he's like, hi, babe. Hi, babe. And then so this became like kind of a ritual where I'd be running down the stairs and he'd be there and he goes, go ahead, babe. You got further to go than I do. So he let me go running by. But he had a good reputation. Like people really, he was funny. He, for the most part, very, very well liked. He was a character, quite a character. He was funny.
So these people sound a lot like the Jarrises, right? Ted and thing. Oh, I think I said a bad word. You did. Tell us about the Jarrises.
Yeah, what is the proper grammar on that? I
don't
know. Jarris. Anywho, Ted Jarris and his wife Melita were in my congregation. They were not the warm, fuzzy types at all whatsoever. Actually, everybody was really scared of Ted Jarris. He invoked terror in people at times, including my husband.
Well, his nickname, just looking on the internet, I see his nickname seemed to be Boss.
Okay. I actually didn't.
Like he's a big bossy Betty.
Yeah, I didn't hear that when I was there, but that didn't mean I blocked out. I don't remember everything, but that definitely would be no surprise. Not pleasant to deal with. He ruled with an iron fist. I found him to be very cold and hard-hearted, very not compassionate or loving towards people. Which
is surprising because he comes across. He was in that To the Ends of the Earth.
Oh, he's a fantastic speaker. He's a really good speaker.
Missionary
but when you meet people speaking, And this goes with anything. Like when you meet a lot of the public inspirational speakers now, the gurus of manifesting, whatever it is, when you meet them in person, which I actually have had opportunity to meet many of them, they're very different in person, except for Jack Canfield. Love that man. That's another story.
Cool.
Yeah.
So tell us more about what happened when you encountered them.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason I really want to bring this up is because this is really important for you to know this, because your mandates and things, the policies, the things we were being told to do, you need to understand the mentality of where this is coming from. So I'm just going to tell you, and again, this is based off of my own personal experience and observation. This isn't something I've heard from somebody. This is what I was there when it happened, okay? So let me tell you what happened one night after the meeting. After the meeting, as we were in the factory, we went to the shuttle. We decided we didn't want to walk home, so we went to the shuttle, plus Melita was by herself. That's Ted Jarrett's wife. She had...
Not a coffee maker?
No, not the coffee maker.
Melita?
No.
Okay, just asking.
Yeah. No, definitely not a
It
coffee
would be
maker.
bitter coffee.
Very bitter. She did not have a good reputation at Bethel. She was not well liked. Very few people actually liked her. In fact, the ongoing thing was if she ever did something nice or said something nice to somebody, people go, oh. In fact, I remember one time I ended up with this lipstick. Someone gave it to me, another Bethelite, that said, oh, that Melita had given it to her. And we all were like, oh, she gave you a present? We were just stunned. And so it was a shock if she was ever nice to anybody. And let me just tell you the story, what happened that night. So we're standing waiting for the shuttle, and just the three of us, myself, my husband, and her. Along comes a brother who, obviously, because it was after hours, this is at nighttime, he had clearly had guests visiting from out of town that were with him, that probably had been touring and all dressed up during the day. Now, I got to give you a little bit of backstory on this. Shorts. You don't know that part of the 10 commandments and anything Jesus ever implemented again, the 11th commandment, as well as Jesus must have reiterated that shorts are evil. They are tools of Satan at times. You wouldn't think that, but that's how they're treated there. They have a rule at the residence buildings. You are allowed to exit and enter prior to 6 o'clock in the morning. I forgot what time at night you could go, but it was like 11, like it was like really late at night. The wee hours of the morning, you're allowed to exit and enter back in shorts because they're assuming
but
it's for
isn't that
jogging.
when all the bad things happen in shorts?
Before 6 in the morning.
My dad would always tell me when I was a kid that after midnight is when all the bad things happen. So I had a curfew. I had to be home by 11. So you could wear shorts at that time, but that's when all the bad things happen.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So what ended up happening with the shorts? So what would happen? Imagine it's summertime, Saturday afternoon, everybody's off work. You know, it's barely your few hours of free time. So with this rule of no shorts, people would put their shorts on, put the pants over top, get to the subway, and drop their pants. And that looked great. That looked better than people walking normally out of a building on their after hours in shorts. They ended up actually making an announcement about telling people not to do it, but people were doing it anyway because that was off the premises, and it's night. Have any of you ever been to New York City in the summertime and have to ride the subway and going all over and you're with guests? You are wearing shorts. You are not wearing pants. So anyway, but however, there was another exception besides that 6 in the morning thing. If you were going in and out of the factory building, you were allowed to wear shorts because that wasn't really where the public was going after hours. And also the factory building had a connection into 90 Sands, another the large residence, one of the last ones they built there. So this brother, it was nighttime. He was with his guests. He was in shorts, and so were not all of them, like a couple of them were. They walked past. Oh my goodness. Then he sees Melita there. And she looks at him and his guests, and she's going, I can't even do it as loud as she did. Maybe I need some more water. Here, let me try.
Do you want me to do it?
Okay, we'll both do it together. Maybe we can be as loud. Oh, no, I think I just sounded like a squirrel.
Me too. I'll give you a nap in a minute.
But she was shaking, like every possible body movement she could get in there and scowling at them. And the poor brother, he looked like he was going to melt into the ground, and his guests looked terrified. And
as anyone would be.
Yeah, she was pretty scary. So I looked at them and I tried to counteract with the most happiest, lovingest smile to them, like, it's okay. And he's saying to my husband, to me, I thought we were allowed to wear shorts through here. Like, he was just so, oh no, I'm going to get my Bethel eviction notice. So anyway.
And in front of his family. So it's
yeah, and friends.
Right?
It was a group of people, and they were all sweet. They were so nice. So they go in. And and actually, let me explain why Jairus wasn't at that meeting. Was he'd had some kind of incident with his heart. I guess he did drive a stroke later. He had an incident with his heart, something. So he was actually in the infirmary, which is why he was not at the meeting. So she says, wait till I tell my husband about this. Shocking. And my first reaction was like, oh my goodness, your husband's in the infirmary with a heart condition. Don't give him a heart attack. And then I stopped and I thought,
let nature take its course.
Yeah. If you are going to be, first of all, if your husband has that same mentality, which clearly he does, then so be it. If you're going to allow yourself to get worked up over a pair of freaking shorts, have all the heart attacks you want. That is just completely ridiculous. So, but yet the night did not end. The shuttle had not come along yet. So we're unfortunately, here's scene 2, take 2. So along comes this sweet couple. I didn't know them. Very nicely dressed, coming back from their meeting. Just lovely people. They had a wonderful, lovely air about them. They come walking by and they smile and they say hi. And just as they go by, she says to me, look at that skirt, how long it is.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh!
There's no pleasing her.
No, I was
crazy.
I was speechless. I'm like, how long it is? What if it was a mini skirt? Then I could see you having a little fit about it. But how long it is? And she goes, that's only for evening wear. She went on a tirade. And then my husband starts agreeing with her. And I gave him the stink eye later. No, right there. I looked at him like, and then later on I said to him, why were you agreeing with her? And he goes, because I just wanted her to shut up. But I refused to agree with her. I sat there kind of silently. I was not going to agree with it. It was terrible. But again, so you have polar opposites. You had Mildred Barr, you had her. But again, the reason I want to bring up this story is because the permeating thing when I was at Bethel, because I'm a person who observes human behavior, nature, etc. That's just what I do. These people are living in this bubble world. And it's not easy there, because that's another thing that bugs me when people say that, because it wasn't. It was hard. They're living in this bubble world, but it's not real. Like, she's getting worked up over shorts. Well, what about the brothers in other countries that are standing up for their beliefs and are getting murdered for it? And their wives are getting raped or the children killed, or what about those people? Like, that's actually a real issue, not a pair of shorts.
No, but that is her world. That's the problem. I mean, oddly enough,
and it became all of our world because it became this big crisis problem.
Big,
like there was all these problems that weren't problems.
I actually encountered a Mildred of my own in my congregation. We had a sister that was nasty and negative all the time.
No, Melita, not Mildred was a doll.
Oh, Mildred, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Melita.
The coffee maker.
Excuse me.
Coffee maker.
We used to call her Sergeant Thingamajig, whatever her last name was. Yes. I don't want to say it right now. But I was in service one day and she was in my car group. I was lucky to have her in my car group. And we were working on a street and the street's name was Doric, D-O-R-I-C. And I go, ha, Dork Street. We're working on Dork Street. Well, that didn't go over too well. She goes, do you know what a dork is? And I'm like, yes. But I go, well, I guess not. And she goes, a dork is a male penis. And I go, oh, thank God. I go, I thought it was a female penis. And she didn't know what to say. And my partner was killing themselves laughing. They're like, it's just so ridiculous. Who cares? Okay, dork.
Yeah, actually, I didn't know that. Does that really mean that? I thought it just meant an idiot.
I don't know. Okay. I used it to mean an idiot. But
okay, yeah.
She used it to mean
I think she meant dick. I think that's really what it was.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. So, funny enough. So you've had these experiences with the Jairuses.
Yes.
And
thank goodness it was counterbalanced. But
when we were looking just into them to see are they still alive? Did we come across?
You told me they just did her life story. She's in the magazine.
In a Watchtower. September. In fact, let's put it up on the screen.
Okay.
Okay, so here we have the magazine in front of us where they do her life story. It's a September 2015 Watchtower. And I just highlighted a few things as I read it because, I haven't been a witness now for several years. And I used to love the life stories.
Me too.
They were one of my favorite part of the magazines, very encouraging. And it's funny to read it now.
It is.
Just for example, okay, like what I highlighted here on the first page here is talking about how Jehovah was blessing us. But there's no indication of what exactly he did. So what exactly did Jehovah do? Did he, everywhere they walked, there were rainbows, pots of gold? I mean, because when I was a witness, I was a regular pioneer for several years. And I didn't, people would always say to me, oh, you're going to be blessed by Jehovah for doing this. You're doing so well. And yet all I saw was a bad marriage. I was married to a JW guy who the elders themselves called a dud. And, and they were right. And my health, I was getting some, was deteriorating. I was getting some very bad reports from the doctor of what's happening. And it was very scary. I never saw these blessings. So I'd like to know what exactly were these blessings that she was talking about. And, okay, so the second page here, what I highlighted here is when she talks about the teacher, I believe it was, the school teacher who was intolerant. And I just found that odd,
Especially coming from her, because she was one of the most intolerant people, definitely at Bethel. She didn't put up, it was her way or the highway.
And the whole, exactly, everything you just said.
She was always right. Mm-hmm.
And the organization as a whole is extremely intolerant. I mean, they do not tolerate anybody who has left the organization, or anybody in the world for that matter. So for them to call somebody else intolerant, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I thought,
Yeah.
Then the next thing I flagged was when they talk about, when she was talking about her husband and how he was so kind and friendly.
Yes, I pointed that out to you because obviously when you meet people, they're going to be nice and kind and smile or sweet and smile at you and be friendly, but he wasn't kind.
No.
He was known for being pretty cold-hearted, like not a compassionate person. Very hard, very hard. So kind was definitely not a word I would have used to describe him.
No, he's not warm and fuzzy. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with having said he's a strong-minded person. He took it seriously, but to actually go the extra mile and say he's, warm and fuzzy, kind and sweet, and it just kind of doesn't seem right. The next thing I flagged was on the last page here, where they talked about how he finished his earthly course, and I thought, of course, that's the kind of thing we used to say when we were witnesses. Because he was a man who claimed to be of the anointed. So he had the heavenly hope, whereas we have the earthly hope. Again, a strange thing to say. But so basically, now that he's passed away, he's in heaven, supposedly, and they will never be together again. Which is, again, kind of a strange scenario. At least, not strange when you're a witness, but strange when you really think about it. So she will never, ever see him again. Kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
And then you highlighted
and then I
else.
Noticed something too, her new challenges in life, because obviously she's getting older. But when I I like reading between the lines when I'm reading things, especially when I have more inside knowledge of things. But she talked about she's not as strong, her association is more limited. The reason, again, not undermining, like saying that's because of her health, but the reason her association would be limited is that nobody wants to be around her. No. Negative Nelly. And nasty. And now she doesn't have the authority to wield over people because now she can't go tattle to her husband about things and have him. So people aren't scared of her now like they were before.
She's a woman now.
She's just an older lady now.
She always was a woman, but I mean, she's now just a woman.
Someone they're looking after and, being respectful and caring for, which, is the right thing to do. But the reason her association is limited has to do with her unpleasantness.
And the old factor. I have to just say this because the organization is not the most kind to older ones. It's like when you're young and vibrant and you can give to the organization and they will take. But as you get older, there's not a lot to give. And they seem to have a way of pushing the old people aside as if they don't mean anything anymore. They're useless. They don't bother visiting them. So again, I'm not just the fact that she's a nasty old Nelly, but the fact that she's old now and she's a nobody because she's not married to anybody anymore. So we don't need to deal with her. And anyway,
again, they're not scared of her anymore like they were before. Not pleasant to be around.
And the
Yeah.
last thing highlighted there was about the fact that it's just a doom and gloom. The way, when I see all the terrible things happening in the world, I'm not talking about the medical breakthroughs or the good things that happen in the world, because there are many good things. If you choose to see terrible things, that's all you're going to see. And unfortunately, that's what this organization always focuses on, is how terrible it is and how Jehovah blessed her. Again, we don't know about any of the blessings she had, because I don't really see any, She's lived and she's going to die like everybody else. I don't see any specific blessings that she encountered, and they're certainly not mentioned in this article. Yeah. But anyways, our little synopsis.
Yep.
So I'd like to ask you now, how long were you at Bethel and why did you leave? I mean, I'm assuming you're not still there.
No, obviously not. No. I was there for just over 2 years. That was what we had committed to do before reassessing. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I have never cried so much in my life. And that definitely wasn't about being homesick, because I'm not that kind of person. I'm up for adventures and I can move around. That's not a problem for me. And I'm also not a person who cries. I do more now, but that's more out of tears of gratitude or
happiness.
More growing, yeah, and a growing compassion for people. Like if people are having problems, I really feel it more now than I ever did before as a witness.
Can I just say something too? I mean, Andrea, maybe most of you don't know her, obviously, but she is one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life, and I mean that.
Thank you.
She's not one to cry. She's a hard worker. I don't know if I want to use her perfectionist, but you are.
We can
pretty
use
much
recovering perfectionist.
She works really hard and doesn't cry and is a strong person. And it's so for her to say that she cried so much.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't stop crying, and that was weird. Yeah, that was just weird. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And just looking ahead, like knowing how you could be gone in an instant from there, that we had to take care of our future, and I felt it would be better served. As did he, leaving. Yeah. And obviously I'm not together with that husband anymore because I left.
That's another video.
That's another video. Yeah. I'll get into that.
So after all the things that you experienced when you were at Bethel,
yes,
did your viewpoint of Bethel change then?
I guess what's funny is because of the experiences with my family as a child, it ended up that it really just came back to what I'd observed as a kid. And I just also felt, I guess it's just like a big company. It's just a bunch of humans. There's nothing that special really, Yeah, it's just a place.
So would you say that after what you experienced at Bethel is what helped to wake you up, like the beginning of the end for the organization? Because a lot of people have been to Bethel and lived there, and then they became very disillusioned and they left. And I'm just wondering, would you say that was the case for you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It absolutely was. I always felt my whole life like something was wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on it, and I wouldn't let myself ask certain questions. I wouldn't go there. And then one day I let myself. And just after having been there and seeing again the mentality and the way things operate, all these decisions that we're faced with and the choices that we are given, it's either this or it's this. There weren't a lot of options, and it just never felt right.
Mm-hmm. No, it's too bad, because to me it's sad, because I always thought Bethel would be the most amazing place to be. It's where Jehovah's blessing is supposed to be. And it just looked like an easy place to live, really. And yet, from what you're saying, it doesn't sound easy at all. No individuality, no options, just do this, and don't ask questions, be quiet.
Right. Now, some people are okay with that. There were some people that did very well with that. But if you had any type of a personality, if you were more of a leader type of person, you would have a harder time there. Unless you were a man, then you could work it, but definitely not as a woman. That would never flies.
No, Jezebel.
Yeah,
you were just Jezebel.
Yeah, no, never call me that. I was disobedient.
Yeah. Yes. So just getting back to why we want to make the video again, it's really to help people, to help Jehovah's Witnesses to realize what really goes on at Bethel, and that we're not saying it's a horrible place at all. We're just saying that it's basically like any other corporation. It's run like a business.
It is.
You're going to find wonderful people at Bethel, and you're going to find wonderful people in the world, and you're going to find wonderful people. Horrible people at Bethel, and you're going to see horrible people in the world.
Exactly.
The point is that they like to make it sound like it's so much better at Bethel, and the people are better because they're that much more spiritual. But there's locks on the doors there. There's
the
bad
Bethel
people.
Thief. Yeah.
That's right. So it's really no better in that sense. And it's also a place where your life can change like that. Like, let's say, for example, you get injured on the job at
Right.
Bethel. I mean, what happens to people like that?
Well, you're given the medical care that you would need, but if it's something long-term and you can't recover from it, they want you out. So it's
Yeah.
like, go home, let your congregation take care of you.
Yeah.
Like,
And
it's, you're done.
No
Like,
workers' compensation, right? Just, okay,
no,
thank you.
no,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
No, in fact, I know somebody who had a car accident and we did have insurance through Bethel, but they wouldn't pay his claim. He actually had to, he sued Bethel so he get his insurance claim paid. Well, I'm like, he did what? And I knew him. He was such a sweet guy. But then they finally coughed it up because that was, he was covered.
Well, because they threatened to sue him.
Yeah. There's just this attitude there. Like, let me just give you another example. I'll give you two more examples. After we had left Bethel, 9/11 happened. That changed everything. Yeah. We had a friend that worked within the medical community within Bethel that called us and was telling us different things that had happened that day. And what happened there was, within this department, they were ready to start a revolt and thought they were going to have to, because they wanted to go help and volunteer like the rest of the city was. All the firehouses were flooding there. Everybody was trying to get down there to help the victims, which is your normal, human, compassionate thing to do, right? Nothing unusual about that. They thought they were going to be met with flack over it and be told, no, you can't go help. So but they were ready just to go commandeer vehicles and go. So they were stunned when they said, we want to go help. And they were told, yes, go help.
Wow.
But what was so sad about that to me was like, why? Like the fact that they thought there was going to be a fight over it. How does that make sense? That just showed such a lack of compassion and humanity that the organization, it's like this ivory tower and we are untouchable and we won't really help you here. Read a brochure. Because they were handing things out down at the site and apparently people got mad at them. It's like, why you help instead of just passing out pamphlets? And that's happened in other locations too.
Jesus helped. Jesus actually did feed people.
Get dirty and help. Do something. Help.
Because they are a charity.
Yeah.
And this is the thing.
And they have this thing. What I've learned, and I knew this again from what happened as a child, it is a policy to never, ever apologize in writing, especially. You're lucky if you get one orally, but absolutely never in writing, because they are completely paranoid. It crosses into paranoia about being sued. And the irony is the lawsuits that they're facing now, and which there's many more to come, are if they had just said they were sorry over mistaken policies or things that they were said or implemented, and they'd actually helped victims instead of enabling the victimization and then furthering it. If they had just said sorry, they wouldn't be facing these lawsuits. The irony, that expression, what you resist persists, well, that's what's happening now. And just to give you an example, a relative died at Bethel, one of my relatives. The funeral services, memorial services were broadcast it was done at the Kingdom Hall there because everybody knew her, and it was broadcast to Patterson and to the farm at this as well. The whole service was, because not everybody could fit there. They were well known. And her husband asked for a video copy of the service because relatives were in other countries and he wanted to make copies and send it to them. Normal, right? Human, normal. He was told no, nothing could be recorded that was being said from Bethel. He wasn't allowed to get a recording to send to comfort family members. I was very angry about that.
Not that it would have been comforting, actually, because the memorial messages aren't exactly about the person who died.
No, not at all. They're used as infomercials. I think you and I discussed for beliefs instead of honoring.
But at least it was something
done.
Things
so it's they've accomplished in their life. Yeah.
And just again, talking about the Bethel family and how what's happening actually this very moment and will happen at the end of this year is that there's a lot of layoffs taking place.
Yes.
This is the Bethel family. I mean, you don't lay off your family. So just to reiterate that it's a corporation and a lot of people are losing their jobs. And I personally, I feel bad for them, but on the other hand, I really hope it helps to wake them up, to realize that, you've given 30, maybe 40 years of your life to this organization. It's going to be very difficult for you to find a job now, right? Because maybe you're in your mid-50s or early 60s. You've got no real work experience. Hi, I scrub toilets. Okay. You've got nothing in savings. And here's the door,
Yeah.
It's just kind of, so again, the video was made just to show you what goes on behind the scenes. There's nothing earth-shattering that we said today, obviously.
No.
but just to show you that it's run like any other business, any other corporation.
It is. It is. And ultimately, you are responsible for your life and your choices. I would just encourage everyone to please do your research, ask questions, and understand you as an individual are responsible for your life and your choices. Mm-hmm. Even if you're believing Armageddon's coming, then on that day, you as an individual stand before Jehovah. So if you've made choices just going along with the crowd, going, oh, well, I was told to do this. If something doesn't feel right to you, if you're being asked to believe or to do something, or if you're an elder and you're being asked to handle something a certain way and it just feels wrong, don't do it. Or do it, whatever action is required.
Based
You're
on your
responsible.
conscience.
Use your conscience. Have a heart. A lot of the problems the societies experience are because they just wouldn't say sorry. It's their policy to not apologize. So if something goes wrong, you're held accountable. You'll get thrown under the bus ultimately. So take note and be careful of your actions.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
so I think that's pretty good. I think that was a wonderful summary of what happened at your experience at Bethel. Okay. And I had a great time. I had a great time chatting with you, and I hope you had a good time too.
I did. Thank you all for listening.
Yes, thank you all. And if you like the video, then like the video. Thank you. Bye-bye.